Welcome to the Potion Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC. Hey buddy, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you today?
Good. Fuck, it's early for you. Give me two seconds.
My puppy woke us both up at 5 a.m. So he was like, I have to pee. I'm up. You're up. Let's play.
Yeah, my dog's getting older. He doesn't, he stays asleep until we wake up now.
Good. This is the goal that we're trying to get to. This is the dream.
I'm just going to kick on the live stream here.
Yeah, sure. Is this okay, or do you want me to go?
Oh, no, dude. You're good.
Okay, cool.
I dig I'm always down for more authentic style over prim and proper.
Oh, hang on, let me get this succulent out of your way. Speaking of...
In the succulent
authentic.
would be perfect.
This is welcome to my new show, Chris and his succulent. Yeah, I figured don't not like pose, and I mean we can see my booze shelf if you want, but
exactly.
My wife and I just moved a couple days ago, so we're still unpacking.
Seriously?
Yeah. Oh, she says hello.
Wow. Hi. Why'd you move a couple of days ago?
I mean, as you can imagine, it's a really great time to get good deals on an apartment.
Wow. Was the plan, or did you just did you have someone fall in your lap?
No, I mean, well, Michaela had the thought, and we were thinking just if there's a way that we can, we were reaching the end of our lease anyway. So just wondering if there was a option to maybe save some money. And so we looked around, and sure enough, unfortunately, there's just a lot on the market. So we went around and found a pretty good deal, but it is what it is. Anyway, happy, sad news. I don't know.
So I want to get pretty deeply into what's happening in China right now, and how it's getting back to normal. But first, I always prefer to sort of get to the nuts and bolts of what is your origin story? How did you start your career?
Totally. Cool. Do you want to just jump into it?
Just head straight into it.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for having me on the show, man. I really appreciate the space and the time and the megaphone. I'm always excited to share the China story and some of the cool stuff that's happening out here in Asia. So, and congratulations, by the way. I see that you just got nodded in for top 10, if I'm not mistaken.
I did. Congratulations to you as well. Bar mentor.
Big congrats. Well, I mean, I don't say that to fish for my own congratulations. Thanks very much.
But you got it anyway.
Yeah, fair. 2020 is a weird and difficult year, so I'll take it where I can get it, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those years for me as well that's been okay, this is cool. That was obviously something that was just huge. That was massive. Because you just never expect something like this to come out of it. So yeah, top 10 for the book and a top 10 for my book as well as the podcast. I'm very, very happy.
Yeah, it's amazing. Congrats, man.
So how did you get your start? You've only been doing this for about 13 years, correct? Bartending for 13 years, which is about 13 years, right?
Sure. So in the F&B in general, and so I guess in the beginning. So I got into this industry at the age of 15. I was in a punk rock band called Flash Grenade, and we needed money to get amps and a trailer and all the things that you want when you want to make music and take it on the road. So we actually wanted to record a record. And so we needed studio time. Hang on, I'm going to get my puppy to stop chewing on this cage. There you go. So we needed studio time. And so all of us got jobs in, we had a friend named Griffin Griffin Brock is like the most superhero name I think I've ever heard in my life. And so he got us all jobs in the local crab house. I grew up in Baltimore, so it's seafood all over the place. And so we all got jobs washing dishes. And so we did that, and very quickly, as tends to be the case in local restaurants, they needed people on the hotline, and they needed people to come in and cook, and people would call out or whatever. And so then very quickly I started, and I must have been 15. And so cooked 3-4 days a week until I moved to Asia. So I cooked, I guess, close to full time, 30 odd hours, 8 hours at university. It's kind of how I had put myself through my first few years there. I mean, that and lots of student debt, as is our story. And so then I moved, so I got some scholarship. I went to university to study Japanese and Chinese and like Asian studies, and got scholarship. And then in 2008, I moved to China for the first time, Japan and China. Lived out here for about 3 years or so in China to attend a translation academy, and became a translator. I became a translator because I wanted to talk to people, and I wanted to be, have a creative, challenging job, and one that was pretty dynamic. And it turns out that real life translations, like none of those things. Real life translation is inbox, outbox, just very, just on paper. And I missed the joy and the how dynamic and how creative and how all the things that we all know that restaurant and bar life can be. So I missed that, and then decided I wanted to cook again. And so I started reaching out to a bunch of chefs that I found on the internet, people who looked like they were doing interesting things. No one wrote me back for very understandable reasons. And in all of that research online, I came across cocktails, and I came across a couple cocktail blogs. And when I was in China, I mean, it was like Long Island iced tea, mojito, all the things that we know from the 80s and 90s were still pumping and popping out here. So the idea that people were crafting these drinks and giving this elevated level of hospitality and bar service, I thought was really beautiful. And so I started making cocktails in my home, and my poor girlfriend would come home and see me like muddling pineapples in a colander to get the juice out and all this kind of thing. And then I started applying on Craigslist, and I was applying on Craigslist because I really wanted a job at Momofuku. So Momofuku is David Chang's, now the famous, he was famous then too, but I really connected with his story, that he was this East Coast guy from the States, he moved to Japan, fell in love with noodles, and then came back and started working at Kraft and learned all of these amazing culinary techniques, and then opened his like noodle and bun shop. And I just thought I just really connected to that. So I started applying to every single position at Momofuku. Due to an HR policy they have, I realized they have to post every internal opportunity also on Craigslist in order to make sure that they're not being too inwardly focused or nepotistic. And so I just applied. I didn't care. I was like, look, I've washed dishes before. I'll wash dishes again. So I was applying to like dishwasher, busser, server, host, floor manager, whatever. I've done it all before. I've been working in restaurants for years. And one day, that they posted for Booker and Dax needed a bar back. And I was like, sure. I had been going to bartending school on the weekends in Philadelphia. And if none of you have ever been to a bartending school, I deeply don't recommend that you go
unless
to
it's
a
proofing
bartending
company,
school.
of course. Unless it's a proofing company.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I mean bartending school in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
Colored water, green water, yellow water, red water, pouring 3 counts, 7 counts. They taught us how to stack shot glasses and stuff. Anyway, but it got my confidence up.
What year was this?
It must have been 2012.
Because like going back to Momofuku, like a lot of people, like Momofuku started out like a hole in the wall sort of like tiny restaurant, Chang in the kitchen every single night. Like I remember him telling stories of like the first 5 years of Momofuku, and like every month was like, okay, let's scrape together enough for rent, and then all of a sudden something clicked, and bang, it went.
It's amazing. It's such a great story, and like they just figured out these pork belly buns that have paid so much New York City rent. I have so much respect, so much respect for the margin of a pork belly bun. But it was years into the Momofuku story. They had at this point, they had Mapesh, they had Noodle Bar had changed locations already. And so there was some bar, which was their, anyway, it was their like elevated, but not quite Mapesh level, not quite. Later they opened Ko, which was super fine dining. So this was like medium high and really a cool concept, but there was this space behind it that they could never figure out what to do with. So it used to be like a private dining room, and that didn't really work out. And then they turned it into a thing. Well, then it was the original Milk Bar when Christina Tazi first started doing stuff. But so they put Milk Bar in there, but then they were roasting ducks in the back. So there was all this heat from the duck roasters, and it was melting all of her like frosting and stuff. And she's like, I can't stand being here. Anyway, so then Milk Bar moved across the street, and then they turned it into a thing called Bar, which was just didn't have a concept. It was just a bar. So it didn't really go anywhere special. And then Dave called his friend Dave Arnold. And if you've listened to, I'm sure you're in the podcast world, so you've listened to Cooking Issues and the ball of amazing, crazy energy that is Dave Arnold. So the long story short is they were posting for a bar back, and I replied, and it listed my current employment. And I was like, well, I'm an industrial economics translator. But trust me, I've got years of kitchen experience. And so Dave Arnold was like, yeah, can you come and meet tomorrow? So I took a sick day and drove from Delaware, where I was living translating, to New York. And I met with Dave. So I sat down, and Dave comes in, and we start talking. And we got to like a half hour into the interview before I realized he wasn't going to talk to me about bar stuff at all. And all Dave wanted to do was talk to me about industrial economics. Like we talked about ball bearings and gantries and like polyethylene and like cold rolled sheet steel and all this stuff. And so then finally he like had satisfied his I guess the questions that were in his brain that he wanted to talk to someone who knows something about industrial economics about. And he was like, all right, so why don't you follow me behind the bar? Pour liquid nitrogen in this. If you pour liquid nitrogen in that, it's going to explode. Here's the vacuum machine. Here's the centrifuge. And so what I wound up realizing a couple days into this job was even though it was bar back, it was just doing all of Dave's really cool science stuff. Because fundamentally that's what the bar does. So doing all the prep, all the clarification, all of the centrifuging, and back in 2012, like no one was doing that at scale, and that was super, super, super cool. I'm not gonna wax on forever about this story. At Booker and Dax, I met Souther Teague, who is at Creative Drunk online, who runs Amoria Margot. He took me under his wing to move to Amoria Margot, and he trained me to properly bartend, which I'm forever grateful for. Then eventually, when the Nomad Hotel opened, they were a few months in and needed a bartender. And I had already known all of their bar team because they all came up in the East Village of New York City, bartending at Deathing Company and different bars. So then I moved over there. I was at Nomad, became the bar manager at Nomad. We won some cool awards. And then eventually I found myself really missing Asia, and knowing that I had a lot of now some experience managing bars, bartending, doing a lot of different, I did a lot of little small gigs along the way in different bars in New York. And I was like, you know, I remember, I know that this cocktail thing, if it's not in Asia already, will be there before long. And I feel like I had some experience to share. And then I met Proof. I met Jason Williams online. And
oh, that
Jason
sounds horrible. You should never meet Jason Williams online. It should always be face to face, so you can always see where his hands are. Like, you should never meet Jason Williams online.
So he's awesome. If you guys are listening, Jason is a legend. He used to do a group called the Keystone Group, I believe, in Australia. So he's done super high volume multi-venue management, but now he's the creative director for Proof and Company. And the gigs that this guy is putting together, I feel like are undersold and under-celebrated. Like some of the stuff that Jason's working on. He's helping launch India's first ever craft gin. Like he's going to into India to help sort botanicals and build out a distillery. He's right now, one thing that Proof is just starting working on officially, although Jason's been scratching around it for years trying to get this over the line, is we are redoing the Pegu Club, the original Pegu Club.
Original in Myanmar.
Yes, in Rangoon, like deep in the jungle.
Yeah.
So Jason went in there and brought a little shaker and a little cocktail set and made the first Pegu Club cocktail to be made at Pegu Club since like 1935 or whenever it was that it shuttered. So much fun. So like, I don't know, I just started talking to Jason, we hit it off, and they were hiring for a bar in Korea, for Four Seasons Hotel. And so then I was dating this girl named Michaela, and we looked at each other and we're like, let's do it. Let's move to Korea. And we went to City Hall and got hitched and moved to Seoul together. And then from Seoul, about a year and a half in, I was talking to Proof. They know that I'm fluent in Mandarin Chinese, and they were thinking about opening a office in China. And so they asked if I wanted to be on the ground floor there. So that was a little more than 3 years ago. And now here I am in China with Proof China.
That's a serious, like, that's a not to fuck with sort of trajectory from bar back at Booker and Dax to Proof China in a space of what, a decade? Less than a decade?
Yeah, correct. It's been, from then to now, it's been 8 years. Sure.
Wow.
8.5.
How do you, like, because I'm sure, well, one of the things I could take away from this story is that obviously you picked a place that you really wanted to work at and you wouldn't take no for an answer. So that's a good point for what kids should be doing this day. I talked recently about just doing Instagram DMs and stuff like that, because online is way more appropriate these days compared to what it used to be. But how do you stay humble, like on a personal level? Like obviously you're super giving and you take your job very seriously, but like 8 years, that's a big jump from. How did you stay humble throughout the whole entire process?
I think there's 3 things to glean here, maybe, for people who are listening in. And that's a very generous question, so thank you. So the 3 things are, one, that's what you said, which is, you know, I talk to a lot of young bartenders who are sorting between different opportunities and options and saying, like, do I work in bar A or bar B? What do I do? And you should, as Souther says, if you're the smartest person in the wrong room, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And like, and so you should just insist on working with the best people. And don't be precious about where you start off on the totem pole. Souther, like, I knew I wanted to work with Souther, and I knew I wanted to work at Amoria Margot. So I started talking to him about it. We started connecting on our like kitchen background. He used to be a chef in New Orleans. And one day he said, you know what? Why don't, Wednesdays are a little slow. I'm behind the stick on Wednesdays. Why don't you come in and I'll just show you around. I'll show you the ropes. I said, sure, great. I'd love that. So I rolled in, show up early, look professional, and just stand back, have a book in your pocket, have a pen, and take a shit ton of notes and just be thoughtful and just stay out of the way. And in my mind, I thought, you know what? Souther's probably not going to mind? Free help on Wednesdays. So I just started showing up every single Wednesday for free. It was my day off. I made sure I had the day off. And I was working a 5-day week at Booker and Dax, and I had Wednesdays off, and I would just roll in and show up. And Souther was either too nice to not tell me to fuck off, or I was just being genuinely helpful, but it wasn't about me. It wasn't about like, I want to serve guests here. It was just like, let me give you value. Let me help you. And I will be here for free. And if you say no to free value, and I'm not even asking for money at the end of the day, like whatever, it's my off day. So it doesn't matter. Like, just fucking do it for free. But ultimately, what do you care more about? Like the dividends that it's going to pay into your life to just show up and work with people that you respect and admire. Like, it's just, who cares, right? Just eat more cheaply. I was staying on a friend's couch in Queens. He had a cat with health conditions that was like shedding and pissing all over the floor. I was on an air mattress. I'd like come home at 5 a.m. and like there's like, you know what I mean? Like, but it doesn't have to be pretty when you're starting out, or at any point in time. Like, just be humble. But ultimately, that's what's going to help you in your journey. And similarly, like I knew that I wanted to work at the Nomad. It's not that I had like some very clear radar about these things the whole time. Like, I had a general North Star, which is that I just wanted to work with people that excited me and that I felt like I was learning a lot. Ultimately, that was my number one goal for years in my career. It still is. Is just to continue learning, to continue growing, and to contribute value. And so I have because I moved up to New York from Delaware, I have a stupid Delaware bank called PNC. Okay. And so the only ATM for PNC in New York at that time was right near, it was right near Madison Square Garden. Hang on, my puppy's eating his bed. Right near Madison Square Garden. And so I would go up there and get money out, cash to pay my friend who I was staying on his floor. And I just went on Yelp and said, "Oh, I'm up here. Let's see if there's any good cocktail bars around." And it was like, #1 bar in the area, so rated, is this place called Nomad that opened a few weeks ago. And I was like, sounds good. Maybe I'll stop in and have a cocktail. I mean, just open-minded. And so I went in, the place just rocked my world. It really blew my mind. And so after that, just if I had a day off, I would just go up there and sit at the bar and order a cocktail and just be nice to people and like figure out who the bartenders were and say hello. I had a notepad. Like, I was being weird about it. Like, I would all the cocktail bars in New York City, every single one, when I would meet the bartender's name, I would open up a file on my phone or whatever, and I would just write it down. Like, Matthew's the guy with the long hair at Pouring Ribbons or whatever. And then before I went into the cocktail bar, just pull that note out, remember everybody's names, and then go in and just say hello. And this is a good life skill. This is not just being a sociopath. Like, I really, I really just, notwithstanding, I recommend doing this anywhere, because it will serve you to, people like it when you know their names, and that's just, it just is important to people. So anyway, I started going there and made friends with all the bartenders, and I was just very, I was interested in working there. And then I met their head bartender, Jess, who's amazing. And I wound up doing a guest shift at Extra Fancy, which is the neighbor bar of employees only. And I don't know, I just went in there and I invited them all, and like I was friends with them all on Facebook at that point. Just said, hey guys, like it's always a pleasure sitting in your bar. Why don't you come in if you're in Brooklyn that night? Like, let me make some drinks for you, return the favor, it'll be fun. And then yeah, like a bunch of them came over because we were kind of buddies at that point, and they had a good time, and they could see that I was comfortable behind the stick. And eventually, and I just let them know, I just had also said, look guys, like I'm not just friends with you to try and get a job, but do know that I would love an opportunity to work with you, or even to stage a couple nights if it's ever an opportunity. And sure enough, when there was an opportunity, Jess gave me a call. And it's things like this where it's just be thoughtful and really think hard about, like, who do I want to surround myself with in my world, and where do I want to be contributing? How can I contribute? What are these people? If you're a bartender at some bar that's very famous, like, either people are coming in and they're total nerds and they're very weird about your social interaction, or they come in, especially in the Nomad, they can come in and they can, especially that part of the city near Midtown, and you get a bunch of people that are not very fussed about what you do. So just to be a happy medium, just to be your own little island of calm in that bar, and just talking to them, and not being a super, just not being someone who's at either social extreme of either very nerdy and I'm only here because I want to prove to you that I know so much about bourbon whiskey, or on the other side of, I'm just here to get drunk, but just to be, I don't know, just to be a thoughtful, kind person. Turns out it'll do a whole lot. So, but I guess your question, which I haven't really answered, is how to kind of keep your bearings across this journey and not get too far ahead of yourself. And all I have to say is, like, who am I? You know what I mean? Like, it's and who are you? Who's ultimately, all of us are just, we're here, we're contributing, we're learning, we're sharing what we know. And I just don't think that things have to be too much more complicated than that. I mean, they are in some ways, but and obviously there's all kinds of, in this industry, and in the industry, there's challenges, and there's politics, and there's gamesmanship, and there's all kinds of stuff. But I mean, like, it's so much of life is already very hard, especially in 2020, that I just don't see the reason to complicate it so much further than that, and just be, like, feel grateful. I think gratitude's probably the number one way to stay grounded, is just, like, don't wake up and be like, I'm the shit, look at all this cool stuff that I've done, look at all these cool people I know, look at all my people on my Instagram, whatever. Just show up and be like, hey, I'm here. I feel very lucky to be here. I'm very grateful, not just lucky, like, I'm grateful for all the hard work that I've done. I'm grateful that I took the time to, like, make a bunch of weird notes about everybody's names. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I took the time to learn Chinese. Like, that's super hard. And just, I'm in this position now. I'm grateful. Like, I feel so fortunate that I am in a position that I can share so much and contribute so much. So, like, just wake up and be like, how am I going to show up today? Like, how can I contribute? How can I be there?
Was that sort of the driving force? Because I think you were still in Korea, right, when you released the infamous Chris Lowder Google Doc to the world. The infamous Chris Lowder Google Doc tour. You were still in Korea at that time, right? Because that got like worldwide press. Like, you didn't need to put out a cocktail book or anything. Like, you literally just put out a Google Doc for everybody to use, and everybody went mental on it.
Still, I mean, I did a liquor.com takeover a couple days ago and just reposted, because, you know, a lot of people still don't know maybe that's out there, and just reposted it. And so many people have reached out and been like, what's this free thing that I can check out? Yeah. So that's part of the driver. Also, like, it does come from a place, ironically, I think it comes from a place of humility, just to say, I was going around, I'm going to sit over here and plug in my phone. I was going around Asia at that time, and I had been doing a bunch of different educations for different bars, educations for different bar groups, and bartenders and things. And I must have been that year in 10 different countries around APAC, doing trainings. I did a lot of work for Four Seasons. They do very well at trying to pool their resources across the region. And so going to different bars from them, going to different bars in China, and also I did some things in Southeast Asia. I did a talk in Canada that year, I think in Toronto. And everywhere that I would go into bars, and people would sit down and they'd be ready for a training. And I would kind of say, like, okay, open book, what are you guys interested in? What do you want to learn about? And they'd all want to say, like, I want to learn about monogrammed ice, or I want to learn about the centrifuge or clarification, or blah, 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 like something really complicated. And I would inevitably, and I don't want to sound too like shit talky when I say this, but inevitably I'd go into the bars, low boys, and it was just a mess. You know what I mean? Or I would specify for hotels are really bad at this. I would specify for them, like, okay, you know, you send your specs ahead of time for your cocktail, and here's how to make everything. Nothing would ever be prepared correctly. I would be like, taste the lime juice and be like, this is very bitter. Can you show me how you juice these limes? They'd be like, yeah, sure. And they just take a lime and skin it, and then chuck the whole thing into a buzz juicer. Like, I was like, okay, so let's back up a few paces. And so, but it just really got me a little bit that, you know, we as a global bar culture, and maybe you could say part of this is due to the influences of social media, and that everything has to be so photogenic now. Maybe you could say that it's influenced by brand competitions, and there's so much focus on the serve and the aesthetics of the serve. And, you know, there's award-winning cocktails that look amazing, but you can't actually taste. Mm-hmm. And I think also part of it is that we as a bar culture tend to really glorify, I think, the aesthetic of bartending. And at the end of the day, you can't, there's no way to put hospitality on social media. There's no way to distill a bar interaction, or like one of the best bartending moments I think I've ever seen is I was sitting in Pouring Ribbons. Joaquin Simo, who's like one of the greatest of the greats in my book, was behind the stick. And he's just bartending, being his super charming, humble self. And so I walk in out of the rain and sit down and whatever. We're like having a cocktail. So he's bartending. Some people come in and I see them through the corner of my eye. He's in the middle of like telling a story over here, telling a joke over here, getting my order over there. And he just kind of stops mid-round that he's building and walks around the bar, meets this guy at the front, and has a napkin already in his hand. And before the guy even realized, and then as soon as the guy, because what happened was this guy had come in out of the rain and out of like the cold rain into this warmed bar. and he had glasses on. And Joaquin knew that this guy's glasses were going to fog up as soon as he came inside. Fuck! And so he has already the napkin before the guy even thinks to take off his foggy glasses. So as he's like taking off his foggy glasses, his eyes refocused. He sees the bartender there in front of him with a napkin. And Joaquin, all he says, super humble, so slick. He's just like, hey, welcome to Pouring Ribbons. Oh, this is for your glasses. I wear glasses too. They fog up all the time. Guys, enjoy yourselves. Here's a menu. Like, no, like, you know what I mean? Like, just disarming the awkward, like, because that also can be very awkward, right? Of just like, I'm watching you, you know, but like just super humble, super disarming. Hey, welcome, here you go, be comfortable, we're comfortable, this is a good space, you can feel good here. And then just boom, right back to the bar, right back, didn't even fucking acknowledge it, like nothing, just keeps cocktailing, keeps telling his story. And I was just like, man, that moment, like there's no space on social media where you can, there's not a filter for that. You know what I mean? You can't put that on your TikTok or whatever. And so what I wound up realizing was that, man, like for me, that's the juice. Mm-hmm. For me, that's the thing that separates like an amazing bartender or an amazing bar team and just whatever else, is that attention to detail, that attention to guest comfort interaction, that attention to like, you know what, that guy's gonna fucking come back to your bar. He's gonna come back and for sure we'll repeat your venue, because he's like, I just wanna, not because he's gonna say that guy noticed my foggy glasses, but because he's gonna say, I don't really know why, but that bar just made me feel good. And ultimately
did you find it hard in Asia to get around that? I found when I was in Singapore that it's a very interesting dichotomy from North America or Australia to APAC, like trying to find that balance.
What I have come to appreciate and realize is I'm putting a pin in that story because we haven't connected it back to why I released recipes. But what I have found in Asia, I originally got very frustrated. I mean, Korea is an extreme service culture, but it's all in the context of Korean society. And so, servers are meant to stay way over in the side. You're meant to call them to your table. You go, "Yogiyo!" and you like bend over and then nah, and then they come like walking over, and then they'll give you what you want. But then like in Korea, for example, pretty much all food is table, family style table service. Even you're cooking it yourself, like probably one time out of two, you've got your own grill, you're doing your own everything. And so Korean is way more about like, there is a head of the table. I'm here, I'm ordering for everybody. I'm gonna like cook some food for all of you, and we can all like sit together, and I'm preparing a meal. And so the role of the server, even to the point where in most places in Korea, you even serve yourself booze. Like there's a refrigerator in the restaurant that's just stocked at all times with soju, makgeolli, and beer. And you just go over and just raid whatever you need for your table. And then they just count the empty bottles at the end. Like that's how Koreans roll. And so for me, I was very perplexed by like, how does bar service even fit into that? And, ultimately, luckily, because like cocktails kind of get a pass because it's an imported foreign thing. And so you can have some cultural exception. But even to get all of the servers to like stay really on top of water service was very difficult. And you can say the same for other parts of Southeast Asia. But Singapore is a little different because it's so international. There's its own mix of like Western and Eastern service expectations that trend a little bit more in Western, and that you should really be on top of tables and be serving them, but still there's this passiveness. And as a Westerner in a Western restaurant in somewhere like Singapore, you can get frustrated because you're like, God, like where's my server? I haven't seen them in a half hour or whatever. And then for managers, it's the same frustration. But ultimately, where I have come to it personally is that this is my baggage. Like the Koreans at that bar table, if from their perspective, they're having a great time. Like the servers are over there, I call them when I want water, and they don't bother me and they don't bother my table unnecessarily. And so where I came to was like, I am imposing, because of my bullshit, I am imposing my expectations of service standards onto these people because it makes me feel like I'm giving good service. But if I'm really truly being empathetic through a cultural lens and really thinking about what is it that these people want from their bar experience, probably it's totally different from my own understandings and expectations. So since then, since I've had that aha moment, I've really tried to just ask more questions of the staff, and even just go out unassuming. I mean, in Asia, it's hard because I don't look Asian, and so you will never have an authentic 100% experience in a bar or restaurant, like 100% akin to what the locals will experience. But you can still perceive and understand and be like, what is it that these people think is good service and why? And how can I meet them in the middle somewhere, maybe exceed their expectations in some ways, but not due to my own needs or hospitality insecurities, like try and impose my own shit onto them. So it's a fuzzy answer, but that's kind of where I've gotten to with it.
In that case, let's go back to the Joaquin Simo story and finish that. Let's take the pin out of that and kick that story back down.
So the very long story short is, I wound up having all of these experiences where I'd go in and try and do these educations, and people were asking, like, one thing that, again, back to Souther, that he always said from his cooking days is, if you can't cook rice, you can't carve ice. Like, I'm not going to teach you how to carve ice if you don't have the very, very basics down. And so I just said, you know what, like, there's so much hype around, like, like, what's your spec for this cocktail, or what's your recipe, or secret recipes, or your all of this stuff. And I just said, look, like, let's just make it very, very easy. I'm just going to release all of the cocktails that I think are really tasty. I'm going to do it from the perspective of, like, I'm not doing it in a way that is, I'm not trying to win an award for this. I'm not trying to get it published. I'm not trying to make a dime. I just want to give to you something that I feel like is a very useful guide if you choose to use it. That is going to take your bar and your bar team from at least 0 to 1, right? At least you've got a core set. If you are new to bartending and you're looking for, like, the core set of recipes, frankly, that doesn't really exist anywhere. Like, there's either books that are encyclopedic, like Mr. Boston or Cocktail Codex or PDT or something like this, that are amazing, like Death and Co. Those are great cocktail books, but they're encyclopedic. Like, where do you start? Or it's like what's Dave Arnold's book, but one of these that are like hyper specific. Yes, Liquid Intelligence is amazing. There's been a bunch that are really great, like all the Beach Bum Berry stuff. There was just this minimalist tiki book that came out that I think is really beautiful. But like, again, that's hyper niche and nuance. Like someone's not going to come into your bar and you're like, I'm going to give you a deconstructed, clarified Mai Tai or whatever. Like it's just, so unless that's what you've spec'd out. So what I realized was that there's a gap that is just a happy medium, which is like, hey, here's where to start. This is each spirit category. These are 3 great, in my opinion, great recipes, 3 shaken, 3 stirred, each spirit, a little bit more for gin because that's important. And now like, please learn this first. And once you've got this down, I will teach you anything you want to know. Because if you've got all of, like, if you are here, then you are super rock solid. I will proudly put you behind any bar in the world because your fundamentals are there. And then yeah, let's talk about all the crazy, advanced stuff. Let's start brandying our own cherries, or let's start doing whatever. But like, don't jump to that before there's a core fundamental, like you're prepared to answer basic needs of a guest. Or you've got, a fundamental hygiene in your bar, or like you have the fundamental managerial organization that's going to make your bar hum. That's just the core. And I just really believe in taking very seriously the basics, and then just build on top of that. But don't try and jump to up here. It's just not going to serve you or anybody, not your guests. Like, it's for a photo. Anyway, therefore I released the guide.
So now what's your title now? You're based in Shanghai, right? You're based in Shanghai right now, right?
Correct. Shanghai.
And what's your title with Proof & Co?
So I am the general manager of Proof & Company China.
It's a big title. It's a big country.
It is. It's a big old country. There's a lot of bars. It's China. If you're listening to this and you haven't been to China, which I'm assuming is most people, just because it's tough to go. It's a long flight, and the language is difficult. And if you've not been to China, especially not in the last 5 years, there has been an explosion is an understatement in cocktail culture and cocktail bars and all of the things that come along with that. The whole infrastructure is amazing. And there's cities like Shenzhen that have opened probably 1 to 2 serious cocktail bars every week for the last 3 years in one city. And so then Shanghai is triple the population of New York State. These are just massive urban centers, and the cocktail culture is really taking off and flourishing, but it's taking off in a very different, interesting way relative to what we've seen in the States or Australia or Europe or anywhere else. Like, it is very partially because the Chinese internet is its own beast. It's the dark side of the moon. It just exists independently of what we see. And therefore, the thoughts and ideas that tend to rattle around out here are pretty wholly Chinese. Like ideas come in from the West, and maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you could point to a bar and be like, this is aiming to be China's PDT. This is aiming to be China's Dead Rabbit or whatever. But now there's been so much just on a local level, like based on what it is that Chinese consumers want, especially like Gen Z, really young people. I think that in China, one thing that China does very, very well is the people who are in the entrepreneurial space in China are really thinking hard about, like, how do we recruit more young people into this cocktail thing? Rather than in the West, I feel like it's way more like, here's cocktails over here, and you need to like learn and study and aspire into the bubble that is cocktails. Like you currently drink shots of whatever. So you're drinking Jaeger bombs, and now I'm going to make you your first old fashioned, and we're going to slowly work your way into the world that is craft cocktails. And then the people that are in the craft cocktail space, I feel like in the West, are just kind of innovating and maintaining this space up here, which is like, their trends are changing, the space, we're going to go in a hyper minimalist movement, or now we're going to say no to plastic or whatever. But by and large, it's kind of like, here's what cocktails are. In China, it's not like that. In China, they're way more thinking like, here's Gen Z down here, and this is what they like. How do we bring cocktails into their space and then at the same time suck people in? Like, so there still are bars most bars exist up here, which is in the defined space of a cocktail bar that you and I know. But then there's people that are down here that are like, I'm going to make a robot kiosk in the shopping mall that sells cocktail inspired alcoholic popsicles that you order with your phone. Or I'm gonna make there's a new concept that just launched called RTD that was like, we're only delivery cocktails, takeaway. You can go on your phone and there's like a 6-page bartender's choice kind of thing, and they guide you so that it tends to fall within like 80 things that they're set up for, 70, 60, whatever. Change the base spirit, change the liqueur, but in general, they keep you within the bounds that it's going to be delicious in the end. You just order it on your phone, hit the order button, and then they make it, vacuum pack it, blah, 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 and you just swing by. Or if you want to order while you're there, they have a huge touchscreen kiosk that leads you through the same thing. You scan with your phone and pay. And then there's a queue that goes around a little island bar that's just surrounded by glass, almost like you'd see a Cinnabon or something in the mall. And people just queue around, and inside there's just bartenders that are like vacuuming stuff, and there's a rotary evaporator in there, and they're doing all kinds of cool cocktaily things, but they're just doing it in a space that's like, hey, if you're just a young person, or if you're like, if you feel intimidated to go in a cocktail bar, like, here's just all the cool shit that we like to look at in a cocktail bar that's just going on in this space. You can just queue and watch and look at it. It's like Build-A-Bear. You can just see cool stuff, and then in the end you get a cool cocktail that you can either like pour into a cup and just drink. There's not an open container law here in China, so you can like drink this low ABV cocktail while you're cruising around the mall, or you can take it home or whatever. So like, that's a thing. I've seen bars like craft cocktails in the movie theater for sure. But also I've seen bars. I saw a place in Shenzhen that's doing garnishing in AR, where you go to the bar and your cocktail comes out, and then you scan a QRC on the bar counter in front of you, and it launches the camera app in your phone. You point it at the glass, and the glass isn't garnished, but then there's like one was called the paper dragon, and then there's like a little paper dragon that like is spinning around your Collins glass and breathing smoke and fire at the top. Like, fuck, like that's really cool. But it's understanding like, what's the value that people are getting out of my cocktail bar. And for very young people who maybe like they don't know or care about the difference between 3 bourbons or whatever, but they're just saying, I just want something really cool that I can record on my phone, share that moment with my friends, put it up online, drink the drink. And rather than judging that, and rather than being derisive about it and being like, how dare you reduce this fine form of cocktails down to something that's just on social media, what they're saying is like, you're already doing this, so I'm just gonna like meet you halfway, and then eventually you'll perhaps graduate up to other bars. So anyway, cool stuff. But that's so.
Do you think that innovation that was already existing, like that consumeristic? Because I think sometimes as cocktail people in the West, we we sometimes can completely forget about the consumer. In the macro, we're thinking about that little niche, like, and sometimes it works. Like Amaro d'Amargo, you're like, okay, well, if you love bitter Amaros, this is for you.
Yes.
Do you think the innovation and the consumeristic nature of China's ecosystem already helped with the lockdowns, and like can be used as a benchmark and almost like a measuring stick for what we're coming out of our lockdown in Canada in the next like 4 weeks? But I've seen a lot of people trying to mimic stuff in China and in Europe and stuff like that. Do you think it's that sort of innovation that helped China's cocktail culture during the lockdowns?
I think it's broader than that. There is a part of the culture here that is, now I'm getting into cultural generalizations, which is always very thin ice, so I'll be careful. But a part of the culture that I have perceived is no stone is ever left unturned in China when it comes to innovation. Like the second that there was some critical mass of cocktail bars, let's call it, I don't know, 10, someone else came along and was like, you need ice. I will figure out perfect ice delivery for you. And now there's perfect ice delivery, and it's super cheap, and it's same day order, and it will be at your bar within 60 minutes. So most bars don't have their own ice machines in China because it's so cheap, easy, and efficient to order very reasonable ice standards. And all of the ice, therefore, is perfect everywhere. This isn't just Shanghai. If you go to like Harbin, which is north of North Korea, up in it's in former Siberia, there's perfect ice delivery. If you go to like some random, it's like I'm trying to think of an equivalent third tier city in the US or Canada, but just imagine anything, it's not just New York, it's not just Philadelphia, it's like Pittsburgh. No offense if you're in Pittsburgh. I'm just trying to give a good example.
I'll be prepared for the hate DMs from Pittsburgh.
What are you trying to say about the Penguins? So like, but this is what I mean to say is that anywhere that if there is a hustle, you better believe someone is hustling it. And so when cocktail bars opened, it was like, well, how else can we get these cocktails to people? Well, let's sell them online. And so the idea of a delivery cocktail came, not too long after cocktail bars really started picking up, because people are just thinking like, how else is there unturned stone here? Is there some other space that I haven't thought about? Here's a great example for you of a crazy business concept. So there's a place here, they do a series of what's called a live house in China, which is a very old concept in China of music venue. And so it's a bar where typically you would get a bottle of spirit, but you could also just get a bunch of beers or baijiu or whatever, usually beers or Western spirit. And so then it comes to your table, you sit there, you're entertaining your friends, you probably play dice, and you are watching just a series of live bands go up and either do cover songs or originals. And that's a whole theme of bars that exist in China. It's called a live house. And maybe you smoke some hookah or whatever. It's a nice place to be. And so there's a guy who runs a series of live houses here in Shanghai who called me and was like, we want to be the first ever like elevated live house that does craft cocktails. And so we helped them put together their cocktail programming. Now they have 7 locations in Shanghai. They kill it. And so you can go there and first of all, like the whole menu it only exists on your phone. You sit down on your table, you scan the QRC on the table, up launches that bar's app through WeChat, and then you scroll through. It's all e-commerce. All of the cocktails are beautifully professionally photographed. They have tasting notes, they have recipes. There's also an area like Amazon.com where people have left reviews. It will also give you push suggestions, like if you like our Mai Tai, you'd also probably love the Hurricane, or something like this. So you can do, and also it remembers your own preferences. So if you like A, you'll probably like B. If you order a bottle of Citadel gin, it'll push you to order. Oh, you probably would like 12 bottles of craft tonic to mix. And so this all exists, right? And so you don't talk to the server. You can if you have questions, but you scan your table. It already knows which seat you're at in which location. You put in your order. You scan your thumbprint. Already the money's from your bank account to their bar instantaneously, and then a ticket prints out of their machine, and then the bartender makes it, and then the server sees the ticket. It's got your table information. They just bring you your stuff. So first of all, awesome, right?
Amazing.
Yeah. So, and this is China. This is just kind of becoming par for course here, where the systems, because of the way that the technology is so omnipresent and people have such a high level of fluency using it in general, and everything is interconnected. WeChat, everything is just WeChat, Alipay. These are super apps, and under those apps are nested all the other apps. So there's not a separate like Uber, Tinder, Instagram, Twitter, hotels.com, movie theater tickets, like all that just exists in one app. So because all of that, you can do your banking and all these transactions become easy. Now, so first of all, that's awesome enough. But secondly, what else is really amazing is that these guys had an even second level of hustle. And this is what really impressed me, is that they said, you know what? We've got, at that time it was 4 venues, now it's 7. We've got 7 venues that do nothing but live music all day. Why don't we, rather than pay these bands every time, why don't we just have house bands? So, that's not a huge innovation. People do house bands in Vegas. You've got house acts. And then they're like, we can lock these people in with a better rate for ourselves, and they have stability. But then they were like, let's live stream the music and let people online that are just watching from home. Let's let them also send like tips to the band, or they can like pay to request specific songs that come next, and that's and that's extra money for the venue. But then they were like, we've already got these bands, and now we've built up this online audience that tunes in every night from their own homes. What if we also started writing music and became our own, essentially like our own label, and then we could license the music out to commercials and stuff, since all these people are already watching anyway. So this bar that is now a series of bars, they own the bands on contract, they write the music, and they've got their own recording studio and stuff, where they are then making royalties off the music as it streams online. And the music appears in like some Chinese commercials, and they make money that way. And one of the bands just got on like China's version of Star Search or whatever, and we're playing the music that the bar owns, and then the bar's getting tons of TV royalties. Like, that's hustle, right? That is
So what do you think that, because you guys are coming out of your lockdowns, we're coming out of our lockdowns fairly shortly as well, what do you think Western world, especially North America, can learn from China post-COVID?
So it's a little fuzzy, because a lot of the learnings, we're all tied together in this thing. Some person said to me the other day, the idea of having, if you have 2 states in the same country, or 2 countries in the same European Union or whatever, that have free travel between themselves, and one has a tight grip on the situation and one does not, it's like having a peeing section in the swimming pool, right? Like it's not tenable for the unique issues in a pandemic. And so part of the learnings, I think, are deeply connected with a very different political system. And so I'm sensitive that they may just not be very useful to other countries that aren't willing to implement this kind of thing.
More so from the hospitality side of things.
Yes. Yeah. On the local or hospitality side, I think one thing that we've seen is some bars and venues have done a really good job bouncing back quickly, where others are continuing to limp along post reopening. And I think one thing that's clear is that people are creatures of habit, and our willingness to bounce back after something like this is very robust. I think don't count yourselves out. Even after SARS, the market in Asia bounced back really, really quickly. Ultimately, people are wanting to be back in society, right? So I see all kinds of really difficult reports that like, oh my gosh, we're going to be down 50%, 60% for the next like 3 years. Just not necessarily the case. I mean, it's going to be different shades of gray, obviously, everywhere. But one thing is just to be hopeful about like the resilience of the human condition, in that we generally, you know, we like what we like, and we're going to be out there, and we're just going to be back socializing before long. The second thing I'd say is the places that have done very well are places that are very good at marketing themselves, giving people a compelling reason to come back, not just assuming that because they're popular, they're going to be full. It's places that are just very active, use their voice very actively. Just people that are not expecting anything. People who stay humble. You know, people who stay humble and just say, look, we've got to keep banging the drum, get people into the doors. Let's think critically, like what kind of people are coming in. Ultimately, what we can all know for sure is international travel is probably going to be down for a long time. And so the people who are going to be coming in to patronize your venues, that's going to happen on a local level, maybe a state to state level, but on a very local level. Like, what are you doing to the people who live in your neighborhood to compel them to come back 2, 3, 4 times a week? In terms of making them feel safe, in terms of giving them a sense of community, in terms of making sure that they feel seen when they're there, and they feel like they're missed when they're not there. So really going above and beyond in hospitality is critical. It's key, because, you know, and making sure that you're incentivizing local travel. Like I'm envisioning like the bar in New York that's like, hey, you know, if you're visiting New York City, you know, working with local travel agents or something, like let's get, for people who are coming into our city just to be somewhere because they've been cooped up in lockdown, how do we work with, how are those people making their plans? How do we get in front of those people and encourage them to come into our venue? And just really working in that way, like just being very, it's so much, we are so used to things being automatic. Like if I've got a good Yelp review or whatever, or even just if I've won some awards or I've got some local press, that people will just find me organically. Don't assume that, right? Just really be hustling that there's nothing automatic about this. And really thinking broadly about what are some of the ways that I can get my brand in front of people. And then on a very venue level, like how to make people feel clean and safe. Here there's temperature gun checks at the door, which, you know, you can't necessarily mandate on a government level, but a single venue could say, look, we're just temperature checking everybody. And it feels invasive, but it will give you the peace of mind that everyone, no one in here has a fever, period. Or have them, in China, there's a whole system, there's a QR code system that's in your phone that once you complete your social distancing, you get a green light QR code. And if you have someone who has a known case in your building, or if you travel to somewhere like a hospital where they're treating cases, your code will turn yellow for some period of time until you are clear again. And then if you're sick, or if you go to a place that's a hotspot, you turn red. And your levels of social permissions to come and go to public places ebb and flow based on your color code. Now, that means that your phone is spying on you with its geolocator, but that's showbiz, baby. That just is what it.
That just is. You want a cell phone? That's what's gonna happen.
It just is what it is. I mean, it's if it's not one company, it's another nowadays. But that just is what it is. But that does give people a very real level of safety. Like, I roll Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 3 or 4 days a week, which is the least possible socially distant activity that anyone could possibly do, is like wrestling with other sweaty dudes with no mask on. But that's, hey, like, I wouldn't do it if I didn't feel safe, but I get my temperature checked when I go in, and there's this QR system. I think in places that won't have a QR system, which is probably like everywhere but China, Singapore has something that's a little similar, which is very cool. There's an app that you can choose to opt in and download that it will alert you if you have spent time in close contact with someone who gets sick. So it does contact tracing. There's things like that, but even just a waiver at the door, something like that. Like, I have not traveled outside the state in 14 days. None of my family members in my household are sick. I haven't been sick in the last 14 days. Blah, blah, blah. Something like that probably will give people a peace of mind. It may feel annoying when you yourself have to fill it out, but then knowing that everyone else has done it will maybe help. So all of this fits into a theme, which is rebuilding consumer confidence. And it's something that I feel like Shanghai and China broadly has done very well with different systems. The big things are difficult to repeat, but the small things, or at least abstractions of the small things, can be done on the local level. Like, just in having a sanitation guide on your bar top that, like, we sanitize our bar every 30 minutes. And if you want, you can flip it over and see the log of, like, every time it's been done. A server will initial it and write the time, or something like this. Little things that just give people peace of mind will really help your business.
So I could literally talk to you for another hour, but I know that you have to go. And I literally have so much more I could talk to you about. It's crazy. Hypothetically speaking, now, what's the next 6 months look like for you?
So in Shanghai now, things are pretty reopened already, as you can, I'm sure, glean from my discussion here. So even nightclubs are open. There's people crowding into dance floors, no masks on. It's just people are out and about. It's just a question of things slowly starting to recover. Still, there's all these health checkpoints and stuff in place. So, and I think that people's habits have somewhat transformed. Like, people are just generally cooking at home a little more. Blah, blah, blah. So things are a little slow. I'd say that in general, things are like 60% of normal, 60, 65, which is pretty good considering that everything was 0 for 12 weeks, something like that. So my next however many months is I'm going to start traveling around China again very soon, visiting with some of our partners and wholesalers in different projects. Resuming trainings, resuming bar trainings. Like, life goes on. So it just is a little bit more muted. I can't travel internationally for sure, but there's a whole lot of China out there. So, and people in need of everything that they're in need of normally, like assistance with their bar, assistance with their bar teams. We're doing some cool activations. We have a big bartender dinner coming up that we're putting together. It's just a welcome back into action, and we're gonna get like 30 bartenders to come together and just break bread and hang out. Little, I don't know, just stuff for the community. So the big difference is I won't be able to go to like Singapore or something like that, but I'll be here in China and running around, and that's pretty much it, man. I mean, we're continuing. It's slow, but it's rebuilding. This is hopefully light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of people who are listening, that like there is a tomorrow. It's it's not dystopian here. It's not apocalyptic. It just is a little slow, but people are out and about and doing what they do. So that includes me. And please give me a follow on Get Louder Now if you want to see what that journey is.
I do love your logo. I do love your Get Loud Now. It does seem like you're about to pitch like a late night Chinese like variety show, like Jimmy Fallon style, like Get Louder Now with Chris Lowder.
And the moon drops in the background and all this kind of thing.
You're the next Conan O'Brien in China.
That's good. That's good. I'll take that as a compliment.
I really want to thank you for your time, man. That was epic. I really got lucky that I just randomly reached out to you, said let's do this.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again for having me on. Hopefully that's useful for your listeners. And please, I do encourage, like, give me a shout on social. I've been also sending out all week the link to this cocktail book, the 178 recipes. So if you want a copy, I'll just send you the link to download it. I am on Instagram at Get Louder Now, GETLOWDERNOW. Send me a DM. I'll send you a copy, and you can get to studying. And hopefully things open up soon where you are.
Thanks a lot, buddy. I'll see you soon.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Buddy. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.